Ellie Harper never imagined that a $1 cabin in the middle of nowhere could change her life. But when she stumbles upon a hidden compartment beneath the creaky floorboards, she uncovers something that could make her a fortune. As the mystery deepens, Ellie realizes that the treasure isn't just about money, it's a dangerous secret that could destroy everything she loves. The clock is ticking, and Ellie must decide how far she's willing to go to uncover the truth. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love stories about unexpected discoveries, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode might just leave you on the edge of your seat. Ellie Harper stood at the edge of the overgrown yard, staring at the rundown cabin that would soon be her home. The paint was peeling, the roof sagging, and the windows were dark and empty, like the cabin had been waiting for something or someone to breathe life back into it. To most people, it looked like nothing more than a forsaken shack, but to Ellie, it was her last chance. With a daughter to raise and nowhere else to go, Ellie had to make the deal work. She couldn't afford anything better, and this cabin, despite its dilapidated state, was all she could manage with the few $1,000s she had left. A new start. Or, so she hoped. The realtor had warned her that the place needed a little work. That was putting it kindly. Ellie had already started making a mental list of repairs. New roof, new plumbing, new floors. The list went on. But she wasn't here to fix up the cabin for the sake of curb appeal. No. Ellie needed a fresh start. And if she could make this place livable, maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild her life. As she stepped inside, the musty air hit her like a wall. Dust swirled in the dim light as she took in the state of the interior. Old furniture, broken window frames, and the unmistakable smell of neglect. Her heart sank, but she pushed the feeling aside. There was no room for doubt. This had to work. She walked across the creaky wooden floor, each step echoing in the silence of the empty cabin. The floorboards groaned under her weight, but Ellie was determined to see beyond the decay. She ran her hand along the walls, tracing the cracks in the plaster, and tried to imagine what this place could be. It wasn't just a home, it was a way out. Then, as she turned toward the back corner of the cabin, something caught her eye. Beneath a pile of debris and dust, there was a floorboard that seemed slightly askew. Curiosity gnawed at her. Ellie bent down and gently lifted it. A small compartment, hidden from plain sight, lay beneath the wood. It looked like nothing more than an old storage space, but something about it felt off like a secret that had been waiting to be found. Her heart raced as she cleared the debris and opened the compartment. Inside was an old, rusted tin box. Ellie hesitated for a moment before lifting it out, its weight surprising her. What was this doing here? She opened the lid slowly, and her breath caught in her throat. Inside were faded maps, yellowing papers, and old photographs. The papers looked like treasure maps, with strange symbols and markings she couldn't understand. Ellie's mind raced. What was this? Some kind of forgotten secret from the cabin's past? She couldn't help but feel that what she was holding in her hands wasn't just a box of old junk. No, this was something far more valuable. But what had she really uncovered? The questions flooded her mind as she closed the lid, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. This discovery could change everything. But there was one thing Ellie knew for sure. This cabin was no longer just a place to start over. It was the key to something bigger, something buried deep in the past. Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that the tin box she had uncovered was more than just a random relic. The maps inside, though old and faded, had an air of purpose to them. Each one was meticulously drawn, with landmarks that seemed strangely familiar. Her fingers trembled as she sifted through the papers, trying to make sense of the jumbled symbols and cryptic notes. As Ellie sat on the floor of the cabin, the sun began to set outside, casting long shadows across the room. Her daughter, Lucy, was playing quietly in the corner with her toys, blissfully unaware of the storm Ellie was about to step into. Ellie thought about what would happen if she followed these strange maps. What kind of future would this new discovery lead to? Her mind was racing as she pored over the papers. There were references to an old family who had once lived in this very cabin, people she'd never heard of before. Their names were written in the margins of the maps, scribbled in faded ink, the Moretti family. From what she could gather, they had owned this land for generations, but they had disappeared without a trace years ago. What remained behind, it seemed, was their legacy, a secret that had been hidden for decades. Ellie wasn't sure whether she should feel excited or terrified. Her instincts told her this wasn't just a harmless relic from the past. There was something about the careful detail in the drawings, the hidden compartments, that hinted at something far more valuable, something that might have been deliberately kept hidden. But why? What could be so important that it had to stay buried for so long? Her thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound from outside the crunch of gravel. Ellie stiffened, her heart racing. She wasn't expecting anyone, especially not out here in the middle of nowhere. Cautiously, she stood up and moved toward the window, peering out from behind the thin curtains. A figure stood by her car. It was a man, tall and lean, wearing a worn leather jacket. He seemed to be looking at the cabin, then scanning the property, as if searching for something. Ellie felt a sudden jolt of unease. Who was this man? How did he know she was here? As he walked toward the cabin, Ellie's hand instinctively reached for the box, hidden under her jacket. It didn't feel right to let anyone see what she had found. The man approached the door, his boots making soft thuds against the wooden steps. Ellie quickly ducked down behind the counter, trying to steady her breath. The door creaked open. The man's shadow fell across the threshold. Ellie's pulse quickened. She had no idea who this person was, but something told her that he was no stranger to secrets or to this cabin. "Hello?" a deep voice called out. "Anyone here?" Ellie hesitated. Should she hide the box and pretend she was just another person in need of a place to stay? Or should she confront him? Before she could make a decision, the man stepped into the cabin. "Didn't expect anyone to be here," he said with a low chuckle. His eyes scanned the room. When they landed on her, his gaze softened, but something flickered in them. Recognition, curiosity, maybe even suspicion. Ellie stood up, doing her best to keep her voice steady. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the corner of the room, where Ellie had left the tin box hidden behind a pile of old newspaper. For a moment, Ellie thought he might have seen it, but then he looked back at her, a faint smirk on his lips. "Name's Jack. I've been keeping an eye on this place for a while." He paused, his eyes lingering on her, as if weighing her. "And I think we might have something in common." Ellie felt a knot form in her stomach. This wasn't just a stranger passing through. This man had a reason for being here. A reason tied to the cabin and its forgotten past. And that tin box? It was no longer just a mystery to Ellie. It was a spark that had set something into motion. Jack's presence in the cabin was like a weight pressing down on Ellie's chest. She could feel the tension in the break, air, thick with unspoken words and hidden intentions. He had been watching the place for longer than she had been there. The questions swirled in her mind, but she kept her voice steady as she tried to make sense of it all. "What do you mean, we have something in common?" Ellie asked, her fingers tightening around the edge of the tin box hidden beneath her jacket. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But something in his gaze, something knowing, made her believe he wasn't here by accident. Jack's eyes flickered to the box before returning to her. He stepped closer, his footsteps deliberate, and for a moment, Ellie thought he might reach for it. But instead, he stopped just a few feet away, his tone turning serious. "This cabin," he began, "has a history. Not the kind that's written down in books or passed on as local legend, but a history that's buried, hidden away for a reason." Ellie's heart skipped a beat. How did he know? She hadn't told anyone about the box, not even Lucy. And yet, this man seemed to know exactly what she had found. He wasn't just any stranger. He was connected to whatever secret the cabin held. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice quieter now, wary. She needed more information, but she wasn't about to give up any more than she already had. Jack leaned against a cracked wall, crossing his arms over his chest. "The Moretti family. Ever heard of them?" Ellie felt a chill run down her spine. The name sounded familiar, but it took a moment for her to place it. The maps in the box had referenced them. But why would this man know about the Morettis? "They lived here, right?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They disappeared years ago, didn't they?" Jack nodded. "That's right. And they didn't just disappear. They left behind something, a treasure. Something that could change everything. The Morettis were more than just a family living off the land. They were part of something bigger, a legacy that's been buried for decades." Ellie's mind raced as she processed the information. The treasure, the maps, the cryptic symbols. It all seemed to be pointing to something extraordinary, but Ellie had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. She could feel the pull of the mystery, but with it came a growing unease. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. And why now? Jack's gaze softened, almost regretful, before he answered. Because I think you've found what you're not supposed to find. And I don't think it's just about the treasure. It's about what that treasure means. The Morettis left a trail for someone to follow, but they also left a warning. This isn't just a story of gold or jewels. It's a story of loss, of blood, and I don't think you fully understand what you're dealing with. Ellie felt her stomach tighten. The warning. Blood. Loss. This was more than just a hidden fortune. It was something darker. Something that had been waiting for the right person to come along and uncover it. I don't know what you're talking about, Ellie said, though she could feel the fear creeping in, curling like smoke around her thoughts. She glanced at the tin box, still clutched tightly in her hands. Was it a blessing? A curse? Jack studied her for a long moment, then sighed deeply, as if weighing how much to reveal. The Morettis weren't just treasure hunters. They were protectors of something. And when they disappeared, they left their legacy behind not just for anyone to stumble upon, but for someone who could handle the weight of it. And I think that person might just be you. Ellie shook her head, confused and frightened. She wanted to dismiss it all as crazy talk, but the look in Jack's eyes, a mix of fear and urgency, made her hesitate. Was this really about a treasure? Or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface? There's a reason. The maps led you to this cabin, Jack continued, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper. And there's a reason you found what you did, but the question is, are you ready for what comes next? Ellie swallowed hard. The weight of his words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and for the first time since she'd stepped foot in the cabin, she felt truly afraid. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a test. A choice. Ellie stood in the fading light, the air thick with tension. Jack's words echoed in her mind, growing louder with each passing moment. The Morettis weren't just treasure hunters. She glanced nervously at the tin box in her hands, the maps and papers inside still heavy with their secret. A legacy of loss, of blood. The weight of it all threatened to suffocate her. She wanted to shut it all out, to pretend it was just a misunderstanding. But deep down, she knew better. The strange symbols, the hidden compartments, and now Jack, who seemed to know more about the cabin's history than she did, it was all connected. And whatever it wasn't just about finding treasure. It was something far more dangerous. Jack shifted uncomfortably beside her, sensing her unease. His eyes darted toward the door, and then back at her. You don't realize it yet, but you're not alone in this, he said quietly. There are others who know what's here, and they've been waiting. Ellie's breath caught in her throat. Who else knows about this? She asked, her voice tight with suspicion. Who are you, really? Jack hesitated, then exhaled a long, slow breath. I'm someone who's been tracking this for years, he said. I've been trying to find it before the wrong people do. The wrong people? Ellie repeated, her stomach churning. Her thoughts raced, and she felt a sudden wave of panic rise within her. What had she gotten herself into? Jack stepped closer, lowering his voice. The Morettis weren't the only ones who knew about the treasure. There's a group, they've been searching for it for decades, and they'll stop at nothing to get their hands on it. They don't care about legacy. They don't care about what's right. They just want power. Control. Ellie felt a chill spread through her. The weight of the box in her hands had suddenly become more than just physical. It felt like a beacon, pulling in dangers she couldn't yet see. She'd thought she was just restoring her life, starting over. But now, she was part of something bigger, something far more dangerous than she ever imagined. I'm not part of any group, Ellie said quickly, shaking her head. I'm just trying to survive. I just want to make a life for Lucy and me. Jack met her gaze, his eyes dark and heavy with regret. That's exactly why you're in this, Ellie. You stumbled upon this cabin at the right moment, when it needed someone to find it. But now it's too late. They know you're here, and they won't let you walk away. Ellie's heart pounded. She could feel her pulse in her throat, the fear gnawing at her insides. She thought she had control. She thought she could handle whatever came next. But this was more than she had bargained for. Suddenly, a sharp noise broke the stillness. A rustling from the direction of the back door. Ellie froze. Her heart raced as she turned to look. Jack's eyes widened, his expression hardening. They're here, he whispered. I told you. They've been watching. Before Ellie could react, the door creaked open, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, with dark eyes and a grim expression. His presence filled the room like an ominous shadow. The moment he saw Ellie, he didn't speak, but his eyes locked onto hers cold, calculating. Ellie's breath caught in her chest. This was no coincidence. The man's gaze was filled with recognition and something much darker. Looking for something? The man asked, his voice low and steady. Ellie's instinct was to run, but she stood frozen. This wasn't a random encounter. This was no ordinary stranger. This man had been searching for the same thing, and now, he was here. And he wasn't going to leave empty-handed. Jack stepped in front of Ellie, shielding her with his body. "Stay back," he growled, his voice full of warning. "She's not the one you're after." The man's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm afraid she is," he said, stepping closer. "And I'm not leaving until I get what I came for." Ellie felt her stomach drop. This wasn't just a threat. This was a warning. Suddenly, everything she had thought she knew about the treasure, about the cabin, about her new life, it all felt like a lie. The weight of the box in her hands seemed to press down harder. What was she really holding? And why was it so important? Before she could process any further, the man's hand shot out, grabbing her arm. The room spun, and Ellie's mind raced as she tried to break free. But Jack moved faster. He shoved the man back, creating just enough space between them. The man stumbled, momentarily thrown off balance. "Run," Jack hissed to Ellie. "Get out of here, now." Ellie didn't hesitate. She grabbed Lucy's hand, pulling her toward the back door. The cabin, which had once seemed like her salvation, now felt like a trap, and the walls were closing in. As she raced outside, the fading light of the day seemed to offer no comfort. The sound of Jack and the stranger's voices echoed behind her, their words lost in the wind. Ellie's breath came in sharp gasps. As she ran toward the trees, her thoughts scattered. This wasn't just a cabin anymore. It was a battleground, and Ellie had just stepped right into the heart of it. Ellie's feet pounded against the dirt path, her heart thudding in her chest as she pulled Lucy along behind her. The shadows of the trees seemed to reach out, as if they, too, wanted to swallow her whole. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the cool evening air burning her lungs as she tried to make sense of everything that had happened in the past few hours. Jack's warning echoed in her ears. "Run. Get out of here. Now." But where was she supposed to go? She couldn't stay in the cabin, not with that man still inside, and not with the weight of the tin box pressing down on her like a ticking time bomb. The box, it held secrets. Things Ellie wasn't sure she was ready to face. It wasn't just a treasure. It was something that had been hidden away for a reason. And the more she uncovered, the deeper the danger seemed to sink its claws into her life. Ellie stumbled, her eyes scanning the darkening woods around her. She had to keep moving. But where? She didn't know who to trust anymore. Jack? The stranger? Her gut told her that the answers she sought were buried in that cabin. But the thought of going back made her blood run cold. "Mommy, I'm scared," Lucy whispered, clutching Ellie's hand tightly. Ellie's heart broke at the sound of her daughter's voice, trembling with fear. She pulled Lucy closer, trying to keep the panic from taking over. This wasn't just about Ellie anymore. It was about protecting Lucy, keeping her safe from whatever storm was headed their way. "I know, sweetheart," Ellie said softly, wiping away the tears that had started to form in her eyes. "We're going to be okay, I promise." But even as she said the words, she didn't know if they were true. What had she gotten herself into? All she wanted was a fresh start, a place to rebuild. But now, that cabin, the treasure, the strangers, everything was unraveling faster than she could keep up with. She found a small clearing in the woods and stopped, turning to Lucy. "Stay here," she instructed, her voice firm despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. "I need to think." Ellie sat on the damp ground, the tin box, now weighing heavily in her lap. She opened it again, her fingers trembling as she pulled out the maps and papers. The maps. The cryptic markings. The Moretti family. What was the significance of it all? What was it that they had hidden away? And why was it so dangerous? A thought flashed across her mind, a terrifying possibility that made her blood run cold. What if the treasure wasn't the only thing that had been buried? What if there was something else? Something more dangerous? Something that, once unearthed, could change everything? She didn't have the answers. But the people looking for her, the ones who had tracked her down to this cabin, they had their own agenda. They weren't interested in a fresh start. They were interested in power, control, and they'd stop at nothing to get it. Ellie's hands tightened around the tin box as she made a decision. She couldn't let this go. She couldn't just walk away. The risk was too high. The mystery was too great. But she had to be careful. She had to outsmart whoever was coming for her, whoever was watching from the shadows. She stood up, her mind made up. It was time to face whatever lay ahead, not just for herself, but for Lucy. She couldn't let her daughter grow up in fear, never knowing the kind of life they could have if they just pushed through the darkness. Ellie had fought too hard to survive, and now she would fight to protect the future she'd started to build. But to do that, she needed answers. And to find those answers, she had to go back. Back to the cabin. Back to the heart of the mystery. Ellie wiped the dirt from her hands, her decision firm in her chest. She could run, but running wouldn't solve anything. The only way to keep Lucy safe, the only way to take back control, was to finish what she'd started. The box, the maps, the danger. It was all leading her to one place. Ellie knew now that there was no turning back. Ellie returned to the cabin under the cover of night, her nerves on edge. The woods seemed quieter than usual, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath her boots, as she made her way back to the house. Lucy was safe with the neighbor, but Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The stranger, the man who had shown up uninvited, had warned her, and his words echoed in her mind. She reached the cabin's door, her hand trembling as she gripped the handle. The interior was still and dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the windows. She stepped inside, scanning the room. No one was there, but the air felt thick, heavy with something she couldn't name. Ellie's mind raced as she approached the old wooden table where she had left the tin box. The maps, the diary, the cryptic symbols, they all seemed to pull her in, urging her to keep going. But there was something else in the back of her mind. Jack. He had said there were others who were watching, others who would stop at nothing to get what was buried in this cabin. But was he telling the truth? Or was he part of the danger? As Ellie sat down at the table and began to sift through the papers, the sound of footsteps made her freeze. She turned toward the door, every muscle in her body tensed. The man was back. "I knew you couldn't stay away." Jack's voice came from behind her. She stood up quickly, her breath caught in her throat. "What do you want?" "I came to help," Jack said, his expression serious. "But you need to understand something. You're not the only one who knows about the treasure." Ellie's heart skipped a beat. Jack was offering help, but something about his calm demeanor set her on edge. He knew more than he was letting on, and she couldn't decide if that was a good thing or not. The way he looked at her, as if he could see right through her, made her wonder if she was playing into someone else's game. "I don't need anyone's help," Ellie snapped, her hands shaking as she clutched the tin box. "This is my life, my daughter. I'm not some pawn in some treasure hunt." Jack raised his hands in surrender, stepping back. "I'm not saying you are. But what you're dealing with, it's bigger than you think. Those maps, they're not just treasure maps. They're a blueprint for something much darker." Ellie swallowed hard, the pit in her stomach deepening. She had known there was something more to the cabin, something that felt off. But hearing Jack's words confirmed her worst fears. She wasn't just dealing with treasure hunters. She was dealing with something that had been buried for a reason, and it was tied to the Moretti family's legacy. "What are you talking about?" Ellie demanded. "The treasure? It's not just wealth. It's a weapon. Something that could change everything. And there are people who have been looking for it for years. People who'll do whatever it takes to get it." Jack's voice grew low, his eyes intense. "And they won't stop at anything." Ellie's mind raced. If she was going to survive, she had to know everything, and she had to make a decision. Was Jack telling the truth? Or was he just another piece of the puzzle? The days blurred together as Ellie and Jack continued to decipher the maps. They spent hours poring over the cryptic symbols, their only source of light coming from the dim oil lamps that flickered in the cabin. The more Ellie learned, the deeper she fell into the web of secrets. Each clue led to another, but the mystery only grew more dangerous. One evening, after Lucy had gone to bed, Ellie and Jack made a breakthrough. A series of symbols on the map matched a section of the cabin's foundation. Ellie's hands shook as she traced the markings with her finger. There was something hidden in the floor beneath them. "I think we're close," Jack murmured, his voice barely audible in the quiet room. Ellie grabbed a crowbar and knelt beside the floorboards, her heart racing. The air around her felt charged, like the cabin itself was holding its breath. She pried up the boards one by one, the old wood groaning in protest. Beneath them, a small trapdoor was revealed. Her pulse quickened as she lifted it, revealing a dark, narrow passage leading down into the earth. "Are you ready?" Jack asked, his voice tense. Ellie hesitated, staring into the blackness below. It felt like a turning point, a place where there was no going back. She nodded, gathering every ounce of courage she had left. "Let's do this." They descended into the passage, the air growing colder the further they went. At the end of the tunnel, Ellie's flashlight illuminated a small stone chamber. Inside was a chest larger than she expected, and covered in thick layers of dust. Jack stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "This is it," he said, his voice low. Ellie's heart hammered in her chest as she watched Jack lift the chest's heavy lid. What was inside? The chest creaked open, and Ellie's breath caught in her throat. But it wasn't gold or jewels that lay inside. It was a stack of old papers, faded and yellowed with age. There were no markings or inscriptions on the surface, but Ellie felt a weight settle over her. She had expected treasure, but this was something far more unsettling. Before she could reach for the papers, a sudden crash echoed through the tunnel. Ellie spun around, her flashlight flickering. She heard footsteps heavy, determined. "It's them," Jack hissed, his hand pulling Ellie back. "They're here." Ellie's stomach dropped as the sound of voices echoed through the passage. They were too late. Whoever was chasing them had found the entrance. The people who wanted the treasure were closing in. A figure appeared in the doorway, tall, shadowed, and menacing. The man who had come to the cabin before. The one who had warned Ellie about Jack. "You shouldn't have come back," he sneered. "Now, you've sealed your fate." Ellie's mind raced. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears. The chest, the papers, the treasure, it was all connected to something more dangerous than she had ever imagined. And now, she was caught in the middle of it. Jack moved in front of her, his body tense. "Get back," he growled. But the man wasn't backing down. "You don't understand," Ellie said, her voice trembling. "This isn't just treasure. It's a legacy. And it's too late to stop it." The confrontation was over quickly. The man who had been pursuing them was no match for Jack, who seemed to have an almost preternatural ability to anticipate every move. With a swift strike, the man was on the ground, unconscious. Ellie stood over him, her breath shallow, her heart still pounding in her chest. Jack stepped forward, checking the man's pulse. "He's not dead," he said, his voice calmer than Ellie felt. "But he's out for now." Ellie swallowed hard, glancing down at the papers in the chest. This was it. Everything had led to this moment. She had uncovered the Moretti family's secret, but what did it mean? The treasure was no longer about wealth. It was about power, control, and a history that had been buried for a reason. A legacy that, despite her fear, she now had to carry forward. "This isn't over," Jack said, looking over at Ellie. "They'll be back, but now we know what they're after." Ellie nodded, her mind racing. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about rewriting a legacy, one that had been hidden for far too long. She had a choice to make, and this time, it wasn't just about the treasure. It was about her future. With Jack by her side, Ellie made a silent vow. She wasn't going to let the past define her. She was going to rewrite her story and the legacy of the Moretti family once and for all. The days following their discovery in the hidden chamber felt like a blur to Ellie. Every waking moment, she was consumed with thoughts of the chest, the papers, and the shadowy figure who had threatened them. The strange weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders, and it seemed like there was no escape from the tangled web of secrets and danger that now surrounded her. She couldn't shake the feeling that the Moretti family's legacy was far from over, and neither were the people chasing her. Jack had insisted they move quickly, get out of the cabin, and head somewhere safe. But Ellie couldn't just run. Not after everything they'd uncovered. The treasure, or rather, the weapon, was not just a relic. It was a key to something much larger than she could have ever imagined. They had spent the night in a nearby abandoned barn, their nerves frazzled as they studied the papers they had retrieved from the chest. But there were no clear answers. The symbols on the map, the strange references in the diary, The coded language in the family's letters, it was all fragmented, as if someone had purposefully tried to hide the truth. Ellie felt like she was missing a piece of the puzzle, something critical that would reveal the full scope of what the Morettis had left behind. Her fingers traced the edges of one of the letters again, the ink faded but still legible. The words seemed to jump out at her, as though calling her towards something. "To the one who finds this," it began. "Know that the legacy we have left behind is not just for wealth or power. It is for protection. For those who understand the cost of keeping what is sacred." Protection? Ellie's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't about fortune. The Morettis had hidden something far more valuable, something meant to safeguard the world from forces that would misuse it. But what was it? What was so important that it could destroy lives if it fell into the wrong hands? As the morning sun filtered through the cracks in the barn's wood, Ellie felt a sharp pang in her chest. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future. She couldn't let the legacy of the Morettis or whatever it was they had protected fall into the hands of those who would use it for destruction. With a newfound sense of determination, Ellie stood up, the papers still clutched in her hands. She had to find the next clue, the next piece of the puzzle. She couldn't waste any more time. The people after her were relentless, and there was no telling how much longer she could keep running. Jack looked up at her from where he sat, his expression unreadable. "You're not backing down, are you?" he asked, his voice heavy with concern. "No," Ellie said, her voice firm. "I can't. I'm going to finish this. For Lucy. For the future." She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let anyone else rewrite her story. This was her fight now. With the papers tucked securely under her arm, Ellie turned toward the door. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it, because this time, it wasn't just the past she was protecting. It was the future, and she would do whatever it took to keep that future safe. Ellie's heart hammered in her chest as she and Jack made their way through the dense woods surrounding the cabin. The sun was sinking low in the sky, casting long, dark shadows across their path. The air had grown colder, the sharp scent of pine and damp earth mingling with the unease that clung to her like a second skin. She couldn't stop thinking about the letter, the warning from the Morettis. "To those who would misuse what is sacred, you will be met with the weight of your own consequences." What did that mean? And why had they left such cryptic messages about protection, as if the treasure was not for those who sought power, but for someone else entirely? It was all a puzzle, one Ellie wasn't sure she could solve. But as the night approached, she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't walk away from this. She couldn't just leave the mystery to fester. If the legacy of the Moretti family was truly as important as they had suggested, it was up to her to make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands. "Where are we going?" Jack's voice broke through her thoughts. His tone was laced with concern, but there was something else in his eyes, something like respect. He had been by her side since the beginning of this journey, and Ellie could sense that, despite the danger, he was beginning to trust her. "I'm not sure," Ellie said, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. "But the letter mentioned a place somewhere we need to go. The Morettis' home, maybe. There has to be more there. Something that ties everything together." Jack nodded, a knowing look crossing his face. "I thought we were done running. But if you're right, we can't let whoever's chasing us catch up." Ellie's mind flickered back to the stranger they had encountered in the tunnel, the one who had almost caught them. Whoever they were getting closer. Ellie could feel it in the pit of her stomach. Every step they took felt like a countdown, the ticking clock reminding her that time was running out. But she also knew that staying put wasn't an option. As they walked, the weight of the box and the papers in her backpack pressed against her back like a constant reminder of what was at stake. Each turn of the map, each symbol, seemed to be leading them to a place that Ellie couldn't quite fathom. But she was determined to find out. The landscape began to change as they walked deeper into the forest. The trees became denser, their branches intertwining to form a thick canopy overhead. The path grew rougher, and Ellie had to watch her step carefully as they ventured forward. The sound of her boots crunching against the dry leaves was the only noise that filled the otherwise silent woods. Then, just as they were about to make their way around a large boulder, a rustling sound came from behind them. Ellie's pulse spiked. She turned around quickly, and her breath caught in her throat. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was the man who had been chasing them. Ellie's eyes widened. He was closer than she had ever expected. "Run!" Jack shouted. But Ellie froze. This was it. There was no more running. This time, they had to face the truth, whatever it was. The man took a step forward, his eyes locking onto Ellie's with a cold, calculated gaze. It was time for the final confrontation. And Ellie was ready. Ellie's heart raced as the man advanced toward them, his boots crunching loudly against the dry underbrush. There was no doubt in her mind now. This wasn't just some random pursuer. This man, like Jack had said, had been following her for a reason. And it wasn't just about the treasure. It was something far darker, something that would change everything if it fell into the wrong hands. The air between them felt thick with tension. Ellie could feel the weight of the tin box in her backpack, the papers still safely tucked inside. Her fingers twitched, as if instinctively reaching for it, but she knew better than to make any sudden moves. The man was watching her with an eerie calmness, his eyes never leaving hers. "Where is it?" he demanded, his voice low and gravelly. There was no warmth in his tone, just a cold, cutting urgency that made Ellie's blood run cold. Ellie stood her ground, the fear creeping into her chest but refusing to show itself. She had faced too many obstacles, too many dangers, to let this man scare her now. She was tired of running. "I'm not going to give it to you," Ellie said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "I don't even know what you're talking about." The man's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a thin smile. "Don't play games with me," he said, stepping closer. "You think you can stop this? You think you can protect what you don't even understand?" Jack took a step forward, positioning himself between Ellie and the man. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Jack said, his voice calm, but laced with an edge. "This isn't just about the treasure. It's about control. And you don't get to take that from her." The man paused, studying Jack for a moment. "You think you can stop me? You don't know who I work for," he said, his voice suddenly colder, more menacing. "The Moretti legacy isn't yours to protect. It's mine. And you will hand it over one way or another." Ellie's pulse quickened. The man wasn't working alone. There was an organization, a group with power and reach, hunting down the Moretti legacy. It wasn't just treasure they were. After it was control over something far more dangerous, something that could tip the balance in their favor. And Ellie knew that she couldn't let that happen. Her mind raced as she weighed her options. She could run, but she wouldn't be able to outrun this man forever. She could fight, but that could put both her and Jack in even more danger. But she wasn't alone. She had the legacy of the Morettis on her side. And it was time to make a choice. With one swift movement, Ellie pulled the papers from her bag and held them out in front of her. The man's eyes flickered toward the papers, his expression betraying a flash of surprise. "This is the key," Ellie said, her voice now stronger, more confident. "You want control? You'll never have it. Not as long as I'm standing in your way." The man's gaze hardened, but he didn't take a step closer. For a brief moment, it seemed like they were locked in a silent standoff, each of them waiting for the other to make a move. Ellie's grip tightened on the papers, feeling their weight, the responsibility they carried. "Make no mistake," Ellie said, her voice cold and unwavering. "You'll never have what's in this box. Not while I'm alive. And you'll never get the answers you're searching for. They don't belong to you." Jack stepped forward, standing beside her now, his presence solid and reassuring. Together, they faced the man, unyielding in the face of the danger that loomed. For the first time in their brief encounter, the man hesitated. The power in the air shifted, and Ellie could see the uncertainty flicker across his face. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," the man muttered under his breath, then turned on his heel, his retreat quick and purposeful. Ellie watched him disappear into the woods, her heart still pounding in her chest. The confrontation was over for now, but she knew it wasn't truly finished. The fight wasn't over, and the legacy of the Morettis wasn't something that could simply be walked away from. Jack turned to her, his expression grim. "This isn't over. They'll be back." Ellie nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we'll be ready." They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. And this time, Ellie wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the truth, for the future. And she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The woods were eerily quiet after the man disappeared into the shadows, leaving Ellie and Jack standing in the fading twilight. The coldness of the air seemed to seep into Ellie's bones, but it was more than just the temperature. It was the weight of what they had uncovered, the burden of the legacy of the Moretti family that now rested squarely on her shoulders. The truth she had uncovered wasn't just about treasure, it was about power, control, and the dangerous game being played for something far beyond her understanding. Ellie glanced at Jack, whose face was set in a grim line, his brow furrowed with concentration. He was right. This wasn't over. The man had walked away for now, but there were more like him. And they weren't just hunting treasure, they were hunting the key to a power that Ellie couldn't yet fathom. "Do you think they'll come for us again?" Ellie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was trying to steady her breath, but the rush of adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was now ebbing, leaving behind a deep sense of uncertainty. Jack didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the papers in her hands, the legacy that had set this whole chain of events into motion. "They'll come," he said, finally meeting her gaze. "And they'll bring more people, more resources. But you've got something they don't have. A purpose. A reason to protect what's sacred." Ellie clenched her jaw, the gravity of his words sinking in. "But I don't understand it all. The maps, the symbols. It's all so fragmented. What is this legacy really about?" Jack paused, taking a deep breath. "The Morettis weren't just treasure hunters, Ellie. They were protectors. The treasure they hid wasn't about riches. It was about safeguarding something far more powerful. Something that could tip the scales of control in the world if it was misused." Ellie's chest tightened. "So this isn't just about money, it's about control?" Jack nodded slowly. "Exactly. Whoever controls the secret of the Moretti legacy controls a piece of the world. And people like the man who came after you, they want that power. But what they don't realize is that the legacy wasn't meant for them. It's meant for someone who understands the responsibility that comes with it." Ellie stared at the papers again, her fingers tracing the worn edges of the maps and letters. She had no idea what she was really holding. But it was clear now that it wasn't just a family secret. It was a weapon. And if it fell into the wrong hands, it could change everything. "I won't let that happen," Ellie said, her voice steady despite the doubt that still clung to her. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to back down now. Not when the future, her daughter's future, was at stake. Jack looked at her with a mix of admiration and concern. "Then we need to find the next clue. We need to uncover the rest of the story before they do." Ellie nodded, a sense of purpose rising in her chest. The path ahead was uncertain, and the risks were high. But one thing was clear. She had a mission. The Moretti legacy wasn't just a treasure hunt. It was a battle for the future. And this time, Ellie wasn't going to let anyone take control of it. She would finish what the Morettis had started. They turned and walked through the woods together, ready to face whatever came next. The darkness of the trees seemed less threatening now, a mere backdrop to the determination burning inside Ellie. She wasn't just running from danger anymore. She was running toward the truth, and she would stop at nothing to uncover it. Ellie and Jack moved quickly, their steps quickening as they approached the town's outskirts. The cabin, now behind them, seemed like a distant memory, a place of the past. But the legacy of the Morettis, the papers they had uncovered, was too important to leave behind. As the map Jack had discovered had shown, they had one more place to check. A mansion that had once belonged to the Moretti family was nestled deep within the surrounding hills. It was said to be abandoned, a ghost of the past. But Ellie wasn't so sure anymore. "Do you think it's really there?" Ellie asked, her voice tight with uncertainty. Jack nodded. "It's the last place on the map. If the final piece of the puzzle is anywhere, it's there." They walked in silence for a few moments, the weight of their purpose settling heavily between them. Jack's earlier words still echoed in Ellie's mind. The Moretti legacy wasn't just a treasure, it was a powerful force, a key to something that could either protect or destroy everything in its wake. As they reached the edge of the town, the mansion loomed in the distance, a large, imposing structure silhouetted against the setting sunday. Its windows were dark, its stone facade crumbling, yet there was something alive about it. Ellie couldn't explain it, but she could feel the pulse of history inside those walls. And the more she thought about the men who had been chasing her, the more she knew that this was the place where it would all come to a head. "We're almost there," Jack said quietly. "Ready?" Ellie took a deep breath. "Ready as I'll ever be." The mansion loomed in front of them like a forgotten sentinel. its once grand facade now chipped and cracked, its windows dark and empty. Ellie felt the weight of its history pressing down on her, each step she took toward the entrance feeling like a step closer to an uncertain future. But there was no turning back now. Jack was ahead of her, moving with a quiet purpose as he unlocked the heavy iron gates that led to the mansion's overgrown grounds. The air was thick with silence, the rustling of leaves the only sound breaking the stillness. Ellie felt her heart pound in her chest, the knowledge that they were so close to the end, or the beginning, making it hard to breathe. They entered the mansion's decaying interior, the floors creaking beneath their feet, and the smell of must and dust clung to the air. The grand staircase, once a symbol of opulence, was now nothing more than a shadow of what it had once been. But Ellie wasn't concerned with the mansion's faded beauty. What mattered was what lay within it, the final piece of the Moretti legacy. As they moved deeper into the mansion, Ellie's eyes caught a faint glimmer of light coming from a cracked door at the far end of a hall. Her breath hitched. This was it. She could feel it. They were so close. Jack pushed the door open slowly, and inside, on an old wooden table, lay a book. Ellie stepped forward, her fingers trembling as she reached for it. As she opened the pages, the final key to the Moretti legacy was revealed, not just the treasure, but the knowledge, the history, the protection that had been hidden for so long. Ellie stood there in silence, the weight of it all sinking in. The legacy was hers to protect now. The world would never be the same.